Hey, good day, everybody. Welcome back to our Zoom Daily with Rabbi Shlomo Schwartz to a realistic map of meaning. Lately, we've been going through a lot of the laws of charity, and the last class really got into how a community copes with such. And I found it so interesting because it is a real developmental tool. But let's see. I think that's where the rabbi will be continuing again. So let's just jump in. Shalom, Rabbi Schwartz. We're going to turn the class over to you. I look forward to hearing more of what you've been sharing.
Thank you, Dad. Thank you. Good to be back. Hope everybody had a good weekend. Shabbat Shalom. And now we'll go back to our text. And we're a little further than this. I'm just going to remind everybody we last left over at paragraph 12, which started talking about different funds that they had, which we had never mentioned before. And so he mentions it in the context that somebody who's just come new to town, when do they have to start contributing to the collections? And it was after 30 days they had to donate to the Kupa, which was the weekly fund. And Rambam says that after he's there for 3 months, he has to donate to the Tamchui, which was the soup fund. And then after 6 months, he should donate to gifts of clothing, which we haven't mentioned before. And after 9 months, he collects to the collection for the Burial Society to provide graves for the poor. And we haven't mentioned that either. So just by way of, by the way, he introduced these ideas. Now we read the source of that, and we read the Shulchan Aruch with that. And there was some discrepancy. The main discrepancy was that the Gemara, that the Talmud seems to have said reversed, and Dan himself noticed that the source seems to say that the first liability or first responsibility that kicks in is for the soup kitchen, which is to the most needy. And so after you're there 30 days, then you start contributing to the soup kitchen. And after 3 months, to the next level, to the weekly fund. Whereas Rambam had reversed those, and they weren't sure why. So we're up to my notes on this, which I will start reading now. And this paragraph is the first time Rambam mentions the existence of other charitable funds maintained by the community, distinct from the Kupa and Tamchui funds, which is the weekly collection, Kupa and Tamchui, the soup kitchen every night. Perhaps he has not mentioned them previously because they are not collected regularly, but as needed. Certainly, Rambam is not saying here that collections for clothes and burial needs should take place every 6 and 9 months, respectively. These timeframes only address the residency requirements for one to be included in these collections when they occur. And there's no basis. I have no idea why they decided on those timeframes, but there is a hierarchy. So keeping that aside, we're going to get into something more complicated now. So just hold on to your hats. That's all I can say. Paragraph 13. One who possesses enough food for 2 meals is prohibited from taking from the tamchui, that's the soup kitchen. If he has enough food for 14 meals, he should not take from the kupa, that's the weekly fund. If he has 200 zuz, and zuz was like dollars in those days, I guess, or maybe say okay, let's leave it at dollars. Even though he doesn't conduct business with them, or if he has 50 zuz with which he conducts business, he should not take from leket shicha peya, or the tithe for the poor. Leket shicha peya, I'll come back to this. And there's the tithe for poor. These are all funds for the poor. However, if he has 200 zuz less a dinar, So that's like less a quarter. Then he is permitted to take even 1,000 if it is offered in one sum. So if he let me read that again. If he has 200 zuz at the minimum, that's what he has. So that bars him from taking from charity funds. But if he has less than the minimum, even if it's just a little bit less, and someone offers him 1,000, which puts him way over the top, that he can take. If he possesses money against which he is indebted, or that stands as surety for his wife's ketubah, that is the marriage contract that if you divorce your wife, you have to pay her a set amount, or if you die, you have to leave her a certain amount. That's her insurance policy that they used in those days, and that has to be kept intact. The wife has to be financially protected. So if you have property, but it's encumbered either for a debt you have to someone else or to your wife, then he is permitted to take, because he can't use up those funds, even though he has, let's say, 1,000 zuz, but he can't spend it because he's got to have it for in case something happens to him. His wife shouldn't be left destitute. So he's still allowed to take. Okay, so let's see where this comes from first. And it came from a section Peah. Now, Peah Peah means corner, and it's the name of a tractate in the Talmud, and it refers to the mitzvah. There's 3 separate mitzvahs that all have to do with the harvest. But when you come to harvest your field in Israel, you have to first leave over a corner of the field. Don't even touch that. That's for the poor. And that's called Peah. That's the corner. And then when you're harvesting, and you're gathering up the cut grain, they had these scythes, SCYTH, how they cut down the grain. Of course, is different today, but let's just imagine the ancient method. So you're cutting all the wheat, the field. So first you cut it, and then you're going to go back and gather it up and put it into bundles. And then you'll come back and get the bundles and take them to the storage. So the wheat that fell on the ground, as you gather it up into a bundle, some of it will fall away or not get picked up, and just laying on the ground. You're not allowed to go back and collect that. You're going through, you're sweeping through, and you're gathering up. So there's some that's going to fall down to the ground. Leave it for the poor. That's the that's the leket, that you gathering, and then the shicha is the forgetting. So after you put them into sheaves, standing in the field, these are bound bundles of wheat. Now you come around with a horse and carriage or whatever, and you collect them to take them to the silo or to the threshing floor or whatever it is. You may, as you're going through, hopefully have a good harvest. So you may forget a sheaf in the field. You didn't, you passed it by, you forgot to go back. Leave it. Don't go back. That's for the poor. So there's 3 stages of stuff that can be left in the field, or should has to be left in the field for the poor to come and collect. Top of all that, so that's the 3 things that he mentioned earlier: leket, shicha, peah. And now this source is from this Talmudic passage that deals with peah, the corner. And it says, he has the means for 2 meals, must not accept anything from the charity dish. So that's the soup kitchen. And if he has 14 meals, he may not accept any support from the communal fund. That's the weekly, that's the kupa. The communal fund is collected by 2 and distributed by 3 people. That's an extra thought that was right there, so I put it in. Mishnah 8, this was Mishnah 7. The next Mishnah says, he who possesses 200 zuz may not take leanings, which is the leket, I think, the forgotten sheaf, that's the shicha, and peah, or the poor man's tithe. Now, the poor man's tithe was every 3rd year of the 7 years. So twice in the 7 years, the 3rd and the 6th year, they had to take, after giving a tithe to the priest, to the Kohen, they had to give 1/10 of a tithe. They had to give that to the Levi, who are much more numerous, so that's why there's more. 1/10 was less for the Kohen. And after the Levi, they took, on normal years, they took another 10% from the harvest, and they had to take that up to Yerushalayim, to Jerusalem, and eat it in the city by the temple. And they didn't have to take it. They could have sold it and changed it for something else. But the idea was that everybody had to go up to Yerushalayim 3 times a year for the festivals, and so they would take this food with them at that time and consume it there. So that's biblical instructions. But that's only years 1, 2, 4, and 5. But years 3 and 6, that 10%, you didn't use it for your own eating in Jerusalem. You left it for the poor. You gave the 10% to the poor, so they could come and take 10%. So he's saying over here that if you've got 200 zuz, you may not take gleanings, which is the stuff that was left in the field, the forgotten sheaf, paya, or the corner, or the poor man's tithe at 10%. If he possesses 200 minus 1 dinar, so he's just short of that amount, then even if 1,000 men each give him 1 zuz, he may accept all of them. That's a little different than the way the Rambam worded it, but the idea is that he's getting in one fell swoop way more than he's lacking. He can accept each amount. If his property is mortgaged unto his creditors or to the ketubah of his wife, he may accept, because he's under, even though he has more, but it's not really his. They cannot compel him to sell his house or his tools. So he doesn't have the 200 zuz, but he has a house or tools he uses for business, and you could sell that. Then you'd have your 200 zuz. No, you can't force him to do that. And then Mishnah 9 says, if a man possesses 50 zuz and he uses them for his business, he must not take the poor gifts. So that also disqualifies him. So we have a discrepancy here. Up here it said 200 zuz, and here it's 50. But the difference is he uses them for his business. So apparently, I guess I'll go with this in the notes, but apparently if you know how to do business and you're changing over money, so you can sustain yourself the same way as if you had 200 zuz and we're just using them up. So that's how that works. So that was the source of the Rambam. Let's see what Shulchan Aruch said. One who possesses enough food for 2 meals should not take from the tamchut. That goes back to the Rambam. Food for 40 meals he should not take from the kupa. If he has 200 zuz with which he does not conduct business, or he has 50 zuz with which he does conduct business, he should not take charity at all. However, if he has 200 zuz less a dinar, with which he does not conduct business, then even if they give him 1,000 zuz, but in one offering, this he may take. To this, the Ramah added, regarding one who goes from his house and travels from city to city to gather, in other words, to collect charity, the entire route that was his intent to travel when he went from his house is called one time. So that even though they gave him 200 zuz in one city, he may continue to accept more on this journey, but from then on, after completing his itinerary, is forbidden to go back, I guess. Right? So when he set out, he had less than 200 zuz, so he can make one around the collection. Whatever he gets, he's entitled to. But now he's got more than 200 zuz, he can't go out again. And then the Shulchan Aruch came back. This is the Ramah inserted that comment in the middle. So to finish with the Shulchan Aruch, if he possesses many assets against which he is indebted or he has pledged a surety for his wife's ketubah, then he is permitted to take. And then there's some more information that I will record against paragraph 14, which is coming up. So my notes say on this, having discussed restrictions concerning the collection process, Rambam now turns to restrictions governing the entitlement to receive. So that's the order of his thinking. And note B is, zuz and dinar were common monetary denominations in the time of the Talmud. Leket, shikha, and payah refer to the 3 obligations to leave over grain in the harvested field for the poor. Okay. According to a note in the Sensino edition of the Talmud, and so that's who I was quoting at that time. Now I probably would have sourced it from the Art Scroll, but at that time, Sensino was the major English translation, and they didn't have anywhere near as much information as Art Scroll does now, but they did have notes, and the note said that the 200 zuz represents liquid assets sufficient to purchase food over a 1 year period. Some manuscripts omit the reference to 50 zuz with which he conducts business. Some commentaries defend its inclusion by explaining that a 50 zuz capitalization enables a businessman to generate 200 zuz profit per year. So what I would like to point out to you is that the contradiction I pointed out earlier, one place it says 200 zuz, the other place it says 50. So some manuscripts, some commentaries said that was a mistake. That's a contradiction. Take out the 50 zuz. Doesn't make sense. Whereas some say no. The key is that it said you're using it for business, and if you can do business, if you know how to do business, so you can use 50 zuz and generate 200 zuz profit per year, which means that you always have enough, because you will always be able to generate the funds you need for the year. And then at the end of the year, you used up the 200 zuz, but you still have your 50 that you're doing business with. So it's like your inventory. And as you sell, you buy more inventory, and you're living off the profits. So that would make sense. Although I did a calculation, the way I calculated it was a pretty good rate of return. We don't enjoy, I think, such a rate of return, or 400% over a year, right? So that's pretty good. So I was surprised that was it, and maybe that is why the other guys said that can't be what it means, because how can you make 400% from what your inventory? That doesn't sound right. So that's why they felt it was an error. So this is the way the scholars deal with these things. Okay, but Rambam felt that was possible, and so he did it. And then today we would have to make an assessment of what would be, possible. What's the poverty line? And it's not 200 zuz anymore. We have different denominations, and we have different standards and so on, but they're giving us a sense of how to work this out. In note C, M's definition, I had somebody ask me about this already, so you got to be careful. M's definition of a pauper was first discussed in paragraph 3 of chapter 7. So we're in chapter 9. At that point, the conclusion was deferred for here. So here's where we're going to get into it. Because M provides here measurable guidelines, Wyden might conclude that he means them to exactly define poverty. Thus, one who has less than 2 meals is poor enough to take from Tumchu. One with less than 14 meals may take from Kupa, and so on. However, the idea that there are different stages of poverty is not supported by either Talmudic or biblical sources, nor is it supported by common sense. One is either entitled to relief or is not. I'm not sure I could agree with that statement. I wrote this quite a few years ago. If you have, let's say you have 14 meals, that's not a lot, and you can't take from the kupa. Can you take from other funds? What if, you just have 14 meals? You don't have enough for clothes, for rent, for so on. So it doesn't make sense that's all that is. Some commentaries suggest that the prohibition against taking from various community funds is not rooted in a failure to qualify as a pauper, but in a failure to qualify for these specific funds which have been earmarked for more urgent needs. For example, to take from these funds may be considered robbery because to do so diminishes the availability of these funds to other, more hard-pressed indigents for whom they were originally intended. So In other words, let's say somebody's hasn't got the money for rent. They're poor. You got to help them out. They got to have a place to live. But there's a place that where you can go and get like a food bank, and you go get food. You have food. So can you go to the food bank and get food and sell it to help pay the rent? No, that's not. I think that's what they're getting at is that that food bank is for people that don't have food. You have food, so you got to go somewhere else. You got to find out how to another way to get your money, but don't take from that's for the really destitute. Okay. This approach explains why Rambam expresses the prohibition in terms of the receiving rather than the giving of the funds. It is the receiver who would be committing an act of robbery. More importantly, it also explains why this rule is stated here among all the other rules associated with community collections. A definition of poverty would more properly have been placed in Chapter 7, where all the other main concepts of charity are presented. Nevertheless, it is anticipated that the next paragraph will help develop a conclusive definition of poverty. What I'm getting at is that when we started, the Rambam described that someone, a pauper, you have to replace what he's lacking. So a pauper is anybody who's got a lack. He's missing somebody. So, and he gave the example of, if you recall, that there was a rich man who used to have he used to ride on a horse and have a slave run in front of him, announcing his arrival, which is that's the equivalent of today a chauffeur-driven limousine. And he lost his money, and he couldn't afford that anymore. And the top rabbi Hillel he had funds that he would supply to have him drive on a horse and have a slave run in front of him. And one time he couldn't find the horse or the slave, and he did it himself. So that's how careful he was to replenish the loss that this guy suffered, because, and I worked it out that this guy was personally shamed. He lost his dignity, and that he could no longer live in the manner to which he thought was just normal. So, but that's a moving target. When it first happened, so you're feeling really indignified. But as time goes on, you eventually get used to the fact that you don't have and you ain't gonna have, and it would probably go down from there. You wind up like before you would never think to ask somebody for money. It's just beneath you. But then once you start asking, so now it's no longer beneath you. You even arrived at a new state. But it has to happen organically. You can't force somebody into that. In other words, we have to be concerned enough about their dignity to keep them above water as long as we can, if we can. My next note is, one wonders about the dynamics that allow a person to receive 1,000 when he's just one dinar short of the minimum 200. If he's lacking the 1,000 under the rule of give him what he is lacking, which is discussed in Chapter 7, then he should be able to receive this sum even if he has more than 200. In other words, you said 200, okay, so now he's going to receive 1,000. You let him receive 1,000, so what if he has 200? He has 250, but he used to have 1,000, and if that's what he's lacking, and now he's replacing it, so let him. What's the 200? Why do you make it that's the level? If on the other hand, he's just lacking the one dinar, why can he accept more? Are there no other people to whom we must distribute? There's other people around. So this is what was bothering me. So I say perhaps Rambam is referring to his entitlement to collect from Leket Shicha Peya and the tithe for the poor. He's not talking about the general, like he's still got a lack, but can he? What he means to stop him from doing is going to the other charity funds. If so, if that's what Rambam was thinking, then his entitlement stems from the fact that the funds are already dedicated to the poor, and whoever qualifies at the time of receipt can take as much as is available. So we collected money for the people that are this poor, The guy comes, we got food. So he grabs, there's food around. So he grabs more than 14 meals worth. Okay, let him take. This reasoning agrees, some continues to read, this reasoning agrees with the observation that it is only the one who with 2 meals who is barred from the Tamchui fund, while one who has only 1 meal may still take the full allotment of 2 meals from the Tamchui fund, right? He's only missing 1 meal. He's got 1 meal, so he's just 1 meal short of the minimum, but he can take 2 meals. Similarly, one who has less than 14 meals may take from the Coupa fund the full allotment of a week's worth. So that's just, we're not going to start splitting hairs. We made a collection, and if you need, so you can give you 14 meals. That's what you get. You come here, qualify, you can get 14 meals. The other one, call there, you can get 2 meals. So, good question. It seems to be that we said that it's distributed by the 3 people that when they have distributors. When they collect, it should be 2 people, but when they distribute, it should be 3. So I guess it's those 3 people that are monitoring it, but it's also some responsibilities on the guy not to lie about his situation. That you're trusting him to come and say that's a judgment call. They say like if they can call him, they say, oh, I know you come here all the time, you got more. But the idea is you're trying to do this. You're trying to maintain people's dignity without letting them get the best of you. It's interesting, you have to stick handle through that. We Canadians, we Canadians are lucky that we have that image in our mind. Stick handling, we know exactly how difficult that can be, but you can slip through. In there with Americans, they have the football, just bash the guy. It's not as sophisticated, I think. Anyways, the last note is the Mishnah says that the funds have to be pledged against a debt, just like the ketubah. However, the Talmud in Ketubah 86a states that the right of the debtor is to collect from standing funds, while that of the wife is to collect from land. So this is a note sort of to myself or to future scholars to resolve, because what I'm doing is bringing up a discrepancy or a controversy, a contradiction. So somebody that comes that you owe money to, unless he has he could have a lien on your property. If he has a mortgage, he can collect from land. But he just has a debt, and you will know, I owe him the money. There's no question I owe him the money. But he cannot collect from the land that you have. He has to get it from the chattels you have. Whereas the wife, she can force the sale of the land from the ketubah if you divorce her, or if you die. It gets very complicated, but there's rules to monitor that. Okay. So we just got 3 minutes, so I'm going to stop here. We'll start again next time. Is there any questions or comments on?
I'm good.
Good.
Well, it's fairly quiet out here, but I do find it fascinating because there are so many, especially here in Canada, the poor that are poor. I mean, the resources are so swallowed up by the misrepresentation of poverty. I mean, we here in British Columbia, I mean, you hear a lot about a housing crisis, but the reality is, the problem goes much deeper than housing. I mean, if these people are given money for housing, they are not going to spend it on housing. And
Right, this is the problem, and or they don't know how to spend it. They don't know how to conserve their resources. That's how they got poor in the first place. So it's an ongoing battle,
yeah, these are complex, wicked problems for sure.
that's why you need 3 people to distribute it. And but it's not to say that they're not needy. They are needy. The people are dysfunctional, and the poverty line is a moving target, because I know today you could argue that there's nobody that's poor, because you got free healthcare, you can find a place to live, It may not be what everybody else has, but you can find a
Food
place.
banks and soup kitchens.
Right.
Yeah.
All that. There's a lot of things, and you get welfare. You know, you get off fun. You stand in line, you get your money, and you don't have to work a day of your life. Um, that never existed before. You know, let's see,
A
100 years,
few generations ago. Yeah.
not a few generations. No, it's not here. But but still, everybody has the normal people. They can't hold down a job and so on. So they have a car. They have tools. They have this. They have that. They have changes of clothes and so on. So you may not have now. Are you poor or not? No, you don't have what they have, and most people have that. So you're below their line. So that
I
where's
remember I remember going to visit a friend when I was living back east, near not too far from where you are, and they lived in a subsidized block. I mean, it was townhouses, but the point being, I went to visit them, and it just turned out that everybody in this entire survey, brand new cars, near new cars, higher end cars, all strewn throughout, and it makes the mind pop. How can they be in need of subsidized housing when you've got an $85,000 vehicle there, you got $60,000 one there, you got $120,000 one. It just didn't make sense that a
but
survey.
yeah,
Yeah, but it is what it is.
yeah, some people take advantage, but it's are they doing all they can to monitor that? So it's
Well,
too
the outcry of poverty is so abused. I think
mm,
that there's got to be order, and it's just neat to see how this is organized. Even down to the meal. If a guy's got a couple meals, you don't qualify for the soup kitchen. If you've got 14 meals, you don't qualify for
that
the.
was then. That was the standards then. See, today it might be if a guy has a car that's more than 5 years old, maybe he's entitled to to help because everybody else has more newer models. It's a moving target, like I say. So to our credit, we have to really we could take a little pride in the fact that we look after people a lot better than in the past, and we thank God that we have the resources to do
Yeah,
so.
but it contributes to tax pressure at the end of the day, doesn't it?
Yeah, 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 yeah. But look what we accomplished. So um, it's not people. Well, now on the other hand, now you have people living on the street again in great numbers, and so something's wrong. They're
Oh,
spending.
we got tent cities all over
Yeah,
British Columbia. It's
something's wrong.
terrible.
That's no good. So, all right.
All right,
So
so we're signing out for
see you next is Wednesday night.
All right, yeah. So you hear that, folks. We'll be back with more in this on Wednesday at 9:30 Eastern, 6:30 Pacific. So till then, folks, have a wonderful, wonderful day.
All right.